What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Art Shack, and in this video I'm going to be showing you how to draw those tiny little trees all the way in the background in the mist. This is probably, along with the mist, probably one of my most requested topics about this video is how to get the trees look like they're being engulfed within the mist. Well, it has to do with a lot of use of different pencils, erasing, the pretty much the mundane stuff, but given a bit of time, and I'll show you exactly how to do it. So first, I'm going to get the camera and zoom way in. A little too far. Get just right. Okay. That way, everything is really zoomed in. You can see it really well. And for this one, I would recommend having a range of pencils. It's going to help a lot in this one. So, for this one, it's probably going to start off with around a 4H pencil. Definitely going to need a B in there. A 2H, definitely. So, I'm going to start off with the 4H pencil. And you want to remember that you want to keep the pencil lines, you want to make sure that they keep going up and down. So, this line here that I have indicates where the tree line pretty much starts, and then this line is where the riverbank starts. So this is all going to be like embankment land and things like that. So this line here, so from about here to about up to here is where the trees are going to be. So with that, I'm going to take the pencil and kind of have it on its side here. So I'm having a little bit hard time showing this up. Hopefully you can kind of see on camera. This back layer doesn't need to be, like very pronounced. You want the back layer to really kind of blend in with the background. So I'm holding it on an angle, but I'm making sure that the lines that I'm making are still pretty strong. Just want to make sure that this back layer really, I don't want it to stand out, but I want the viewer to still be able to make out that there's very distant trees back there. So I'm just working that out. One thing you can do to help with keeping from smearing is this is a piece of cellophane. Actually, it's a piece of Duralar. You can buy pads of it at an art store. Hopefully it doesn't reflect too much, but I'm going to use this so that way you can everyone can still see the drawing, and that way I don't smudge with my hand. Okay. This is a rather time-consuming process. You guys probably know me. I can spend a long time doing one thing on a drawing. So one thing you also want to do is make sure you vary this line. Make sure that it comes up higher in some points, and then it kind of goes back down. But really, what this actually looks like, if you've ever seen what a sound file looks like, I'm always editing, so it's kind of the best example I can kind of give, and that's what it looks like. A sound file, like the visual form, you can see the waveform. Or another example is like if you see a movie where they have an earthquake, and you see the that device that the needle going back and forth that's making those lines. That's what this is really looking like. So if you make lines sort of like that, that's basically all this is. I'm just trying to darken up the first few trees that I made in here because they're not really showing up that well, and I want to make sure that they show up, a little bit. You want to be able to see them, but just enough so that they really look like they're being engulfed within the mist here. Something like that. Now, I'm not really going in for heavy detail here. I'm just kind of just making these lines go in just so that you can really kind of tell that there's some trees going on back here. And as I'm getting towards the bottoms of these, I'm just kind of shading in. I'm not really going in for the detail anymore. And like before, I have my reference drawing, and if you would like to view the reference drawing as well and kind of follow along, I'll have that in the description. I think I have it in the description of all the videos so far. That way if anyone wants to just follow along and see what, I'm drawing from, that's what I'm drawing from. And also check out the original video. I'll have it at the end of this video. That way you can kind of get the idea of the whole thing in a span of a short amount of time. And it will help to reinforce what is going on within this video. So this is just the first layer of pencil that's going down. There's going to be about 2 or 3 more layers of this. And hopefully the camera's picking up the detail that I'm adding in. I'd be devastated if it wasn't. But this camera usually does pretty well with picking up the drawing. So hopefully it's doing its thing. Every once in a while I'm kind of going in and darkening things up just a little bit, just to make sure that they show up. Because I can see right here that it doesn't really show up too well. So I just want to make sure so that I take care of that and that it looks good. Alright, so and this layer of trees kind of works its way down more towards this line that I have. So, I mean, the unfortunate part about this drawing is it kind of can get repetitive, but it's a pretty important part of it. And you can kind of see the shapes of the trees starting to show through. It's starting to come around. And more towards over here, a lot of these trees start to go further and further into the distance, so I'm not adding in as much varying detail to everything. I'm just kind of going in for a rough shading over here. And just remember that we don't need to add in too much detail back by these trees that I'm eventually going to be adding in, because it's just going to cover it up in the end anyway. So in this area, it's just going to be a matter of just adding in a small amount of detail. The detail gets significantly less the further and further that object is from you. Okay. So that's the basic first layer there. I'm gonna go back in and just kind of fix in what's going on over here and make it just a little bit darker. Hopefully then it'll show up a little bit better on camera, and it'll just show up a little bit better in general, so that way it'll have a slightly better look to it. But again, I don't want it to show up too much. Alright, I'm going to call it like that. And if I can find it, 2H, here we go. Now if you're using a, what to call it, like a regular school pencil, you might have a hard time with this part of the drawing. You might be able to pull it off, but even I might have a hard time doing that, so you just want to be very careful. You want to, if you're doing it that way, you want to make sure you do the first layer very lightly. And then, slightly add in pressure for the second layer, and, so on. So with this layer, it's going to be slightly darker, so that way you can tell that it's starting to emerge through the mist, and it'll have much more pronounced detail. Well, slightly, so you won't have the defined trees just yet, but we're getting there. And I'm still kind of using it on its side just so I can cover a lot of ground pretty quickly here. And then you want to sort of press this one pretty heavily onto the where you previously applied pencil. it can be a bit of a challenge to get it to show up, but with a little bit of effort, it'll show through. And this layer, I'm going to carry down pretty far, just to kind of shade in the area, set it up for the next layer that I'm adding in here. And you want to make sure that you vary the height of the tree line. That's the biggest thing to making something believable. If it was the same height all the way through, it wouldn't show up as believable, because remember that wildlife tends to be very organic in its shapes and forms. So you want to vary everything, make it more original and more organic. As you go, you want to make sure you keep rotating that pencil so that way you get the sharper edge down on the page. That way you can make a bit more pronounced details and things like that. I mean, not that this part of the drawing needs to be heavily detailed, it just needs to be enough so that way you can tell that there are trees in this part of the drawing. Also, you want to leave some of this area of white in here. In some areas, leave that in. It'll help to make it look like the mist is really engulfing some areas. So you can see over in here, hopefully, that some of these areas in here are really light. So it helps to make it look like this mist is really interacting with what's going on within the trees. It's what really gives it the effect. It also helps to define the layers between the trees. It helps to show you which ones are closer, which ones are further. Alright, I'm getting closer over to where the riverbank is. And over here, I'm not really adding in too much varying detail. Just remember, it's getting further away. This is where everything kind of tends to merge, and it's hard to tell where one tree is and the other one, or one tree ends and when the other one begins. Everything just starts to merge together into one. I'll go in there with another pencil and bring out individual trees here and there, but not too many. And then over here behind the trees, I'm not really too worried about it at all. I'm just going to kind of fill in the area. And I'll let the detail work later on of the trees kind of hide what's going on back here. This area over here I kind of messed up a little bit. There was some residual pencil graphite on the wood of my pencil, and it transferred over here, so I'm just going to erase that out real quick and go back in and fix it up. No big deal. I'm going to go back in into small areas and just add in some individual trees here, or just to get a little bit more detail going on over here. So just going in just a little bit here and there, not too much, just to kind of bring out a few of the trees here and there. I'm not going to be adding in any details to these trees. A little bit further down the road, I'm going to be adding in some individual trees here and there. The key is, you don't need to draw in the full amount of details for everything that you draw. You just need to select a few elements and add details to that, and it helps to tell the viewer what the surrounding objects are. So, example, is with these, I'm going to be adding in some fully detailed trees within these, the massive trees, just to help to reinforce, to tell whoever's viewing this that I'm drawing in trees here. But I'm also helping to convey that the trees are far away because I'm not adding in anywhere near as the amount of detail that a tree would normally have. So you can just keep that in mind. Alright, I might actually go in a little bit up on the top here and just add in a little bit more tree work at the very, very top here. Just a little bit. Just to kind of make this forest a little bit taller. Just a little bit though. You can do this if you like, you don't have to. There, I mean, just a little bit more trees in there. Okay. For the next layer, I'm going to be grabbing a B pencil. This sounds like a good pencil to use. Okay. This is the layer that I believe that I'll be carrying all the way down to the bottom here. So this one's going to show up pretty dark compared to everything else. And with this one, I'm going to have some of the tops of the trees really venture up there. But most of them are just going to be kind of hanging out towards the bottoms here. Something like that. Now the B pencil can get pretty dark relatively quickly, so you just want to be careful. I want to help to preserve those tones. Something like that. And then every now and then you want to have a darker, more pronounced line come through. And then those more pronounced lines, we can then go back in later and add a bit of the tree detail. But you don't want to go too crazy with it. Towards the bottoms here, where the tree line's going to meet land, you want to add in some defined pencil lines just to kind of show that there's a lot of tree trunks going on around in here. And then you also want to have this line kind of, the line where the tree line is, kind of vary a little bit. That way it's not just a straight line. But we'll work on that in a little bit, where I'll draw in the riverbank. It'll help to sort of define everything and tell you where things begin and other things end. So most of the detail work of this drawing happens, on this area of the drawing. It's definitely the most pronounced portion of it. And then I balance that with 3 trees on this side. And it just helps to bring, harmony within the middle that doesn't have too much detail, but it's a nice area for the eye to sort of check out and see what's going on. Alright. So, like I'm doing before, I'm just adding in a few pronounced lines here and there, but not too many. Definitely want to have a couple detailed lines in between where everything is not so detailed. It makes it look like a couple trees are kind of popping out here and there. Helps to add to the dynamic. Makes it look like there's a lot of depth going on. It's all about illusion when you're drawing. Making the illusion that there's a 3-dimensional environment that exists on a 2-dimensional plane. That's probably the most difficult part people have with drawing, is just converting a 3-dimensional object to something that has only 2 dimensions to it. And you have to come up with a lot of tricks for giving off the illusion that you're looking at something 3-dimensional, but only on a 2-dimensional plane. But that's where I'm here to lend a hand and hopefully give everyone an idea of how to pursue that or accomplish that within the drawing. And although it takes time, with time and practice usually comes great reward. So it just takes time. So I'm just still working out where things are kind of existing and working out the shoreline here just a little bit. just playing around with it. I'm gonna have to sharpen the pencil. So that's the thing with the higher the number in B you go, the softer that graphite is, and the more often you have to sharpen it. If you're using like a 4H pencil, you have to sharpen that thing maybe once every half hour. You hardly use any of that. Also, if you happen to have like a mechanical pencil, this layer of tree line, that would also be a pretty good way of doing it. That way you can add in some nice detail without having to constantly sharpen the pencil. And in this area, this is where I'm going to start to kind of taper off with the heavy pencil lines. I'm just going to kind of go in here and there, but not too much. This is where the details of the trees really start to kind of disappear. But you still want to make sure that they're present. But ever so gradually just have all that details just kind of taper off. Alright, so with something like this drawn, now I'm going to go into individual trees and add in some details. So you kind of want to pick out a couple tree tops, so let's make one right about here. And all you gotta do is just kind of hold the pencil at its side and just kind of add in some tree branches. You want to make sure you kind of go out a little bit as you work your way down, but just something like that. I mean, you don't want to overkill it, you know, just want to do a gradual tree. And then maybe there's another one that's kind of poking out over here. And if you work your pencil on the side, it really does a lot of the detail work for you. You just kind of want to work it back and forth until you get that detail coming through. So we got one there. Maybe there's another one that's kind of chilling way back over here, just hanging out, doing its thing. I don't know what trees do, but they just kind of hang around. They just exist in their beauty. Alright. And then maybe there's another, a little one, not so little, but you know, not so detailed, kind of hanging out over here. Maybe there's something going on right about here. Not too much there, just a little something. A little bit of detail coming through just right there. A little bit more coming through right here. I want to add some trees, you know, just a little bit of detail showing that they're kind of just sitting within the mass of the trees. And I'll have another one right about here. Something like that. And you don't want to go too crazy with this, but have something else right about there. Maybe have, see, another thing you can do is grab like a 2H pencil and maybe add a bit of a details for a tree that's really far away. So maybe there's another one way up in here. Now these you don't really want to add too much, but you can always add in a little bit just to kind of tell that there's, you know, a really pronounced tree that lives way back within the mist here. And going back with the B pencil, maybe there's a bit of a pronounced tree right about here. Not too much detail though. It's kind of getting a little bit farther away. A little bit something there. A little bit right there. I'm going to switch back to the 2H pencil and just add in a little bit of detail back within these trees. Just a little bit though. Something like that. Hopefully the camera's picking up everything that I'm doing here. Alright, so I'm going to leave this part off like that. Next thing I'm going to do is just kind of quickly put in the shoreline here. And the shoreline is actually pretty simple. Grab a pencil sharpener, sharpen up the pencil real quick. It's the most important part, right? And make sure everything's ready to go. So the shoreline is actually pretty simple. I just quickly threw that in when I was doing the original, and I really liked how it looked. So all I do is hold a pencil on its extreme side. You want to make sure that the complete amount of graphite that's available is in contact with the page. And you just kind of want to hold at an angle and just kind of, play around with it and drag it towards the shoreline. Something like this. You want to make sure that you're working at an angle like this, not quite horizontal. You want to kind of work everything towards the shoreline here, or the riverbank, whichever you prefer to call it. And then you can work it up into the trees here. Something like that. This helps just to create a lot of texture. That maybe there's a lot of dirt or something on here. Just something like this. Just creates a nice embankment. This is where I kind of cheat with the details. I'm not really paying too close of attention to what kind of detail I'm just adding in. This is kind of like what I call my filler details. It kind of takes the shape of whatever you want it to be, I guess you could say, depicting, or I guess by determining what objects are around it. And up here, the shoreline gets drastically smaller. And back here, I'm going to carry this tree line down a bit. Ever so slightly. And then with that done, I'm just going to grab a blending stump and very lightly go over what I have. Not too much though, you still want to leave some of those highlights in there. Something like that. And then where the water is going to be, I'm going to go back in and make this part just a little bit darker, just to kind of show that this could be like a sandy area that's wet from the water. Or it could just be wet dirt. Either way. Just something like that. It also helps to define where the water is and the riverbank starts, or where the water ends and the riverbank starts. That's what I want to say. Just helps to define those areas. And I'm just going back in, adding a bit more contrast here and there. Not too much. I also want to kind of add in or start to hint that there's some rather large clusters of rocks that are also on here. So what I'm doing with that is just kind of moving up like this and then going back down. So kind of like a big triangle arc sort of shape. And just kind of making some small stones along the shoreline here. It just helps to add a bit of a barrier between the trees and the shoreline. You can add in a few small stones or something towards the shoreline there. Something a bit like that. And just like that, you have a riverbank. So hopefully you all could see that rather, relatively well. The camera seems to be picking it up really well. Hopefully, that's what I'm hoping for. I'll find out when I'm editing the video how everything came out, but I hope it came out well. I can't really see on the small screen that I have for the camera, so hopefully it came out well. And then the end here, you can just kind of doctor up a little bit. There we go. So hopefully you all enjoyed in that one. I want to thank you all very much for taking the time and watching this one, and I'll see you all for the next part where I take on the river, and I'll show you how to draw that within hopefully a reasonable amount of time. I'll zoom back out so you can kind of see everything that we've accomplished so far, and hopefully I really hope that you guys kind of have something similar to what's going on here. That's what I'm aiming for. So leave in the comments below how everything is going with yours, and I'm really curious to know. But like I said, I want to thank you all very much for watching, and please subscribe. It really helps out, and also like the video. And I will see you all later. Take care.